everyone, I'm Ashley McMahon, Senior Director of Global Marketing at SmartEye. Welcome to the Human-Centric AI Podcast, where each episode we will interview a thought leader doing cutting-edge work in the AI space. A little about us, Affectiva is on a mission to humanize technology. Acquired by SmartEye in 2021, Affectiva created and defined the category of emotion AI. Built on deep learning, computer vision, speech science, and massive amounts of real-world data, Affectiva's technology can detect nuanced human emotions, complex cognitive states, activities, interactions, and objects people use. For over 20 years, SmartEye has developed AI in the form of eye-tracking technology that understands, supports, and predicts a person's intentions and actions. By carefully studying eye, facial, and head movement, our technology can draw conclusions about a person's awareness and mental state. Our eye-tracking technology is providing new insights for research within aerospace, aviation, neuroscience, and more. So today's episode features Deepak Varna, Head of Neuroscience Insights at Kantar North America. Deepak has been working with Kantar for over 5 years to improve insight delivery from neuroscience tools, including client-specific training programs, especially focusing on facial coding. He has over 13 years of global experience in neuroscience in the areas of advertising, brand equity, and shopper solutions. He also has close to 20 years' experience in traditional qualitative and quantitative marketing research techniques. Deepak was Executive Vice President, Client Services at Nielsen NeuroFocus, where he managed the international business and managed relationships with several global clients, making neuroscience a protocol in the areas of copy testing, packaging, product testing, and POS testing. In our conversation, we dove deeper into a recent webinar Kantar held on diverse reactions to inclusive advertising, some insights of which were uncovered using Affectiva's Emotion AI technology. Let's listen in to learn more. All right. So hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. With me, I have Deepak Varma. Thank you so much for making the time to speak with me.
Sure. My pleasure.
All right. So to start, tell us about your background. How has your career path taken you to Kantar?
Okay, well, that's very interesting. I used to be the country head for Nielsen Custom Research about 13 years ago. And I was sitting and having a discussion with my boss in terms of what I needed to do next. And, after our discussion, he basically said, why don't you figure out what you want to do and see what opportunities you'd like to pursue. And while kind of having this discussion, I bumped across NeuroFocus, which was this company which was doing neuromarketing. And I ended up meeting them and was literally sat in front of a demo where somebody was wearing an EEG cap and they were looking at an ad. Mm-hmm. And they asked them, what do you remember of this ad? And they kind of talked about it. And then they could literally show what the person was remembering about that. And that kind of blew my mind. And I said, this is absolutely amazing stuff. And I ended up joining the company. And I remember as part of, working with the founders who were absolutely brilliant, I sat in a lecture by the head of neuroscience at Cal, who was also one of the founders. And I think that was that moment which was a life-changing moment for me. And I realized that neuroscience tells you so much about consumer behavior that I honestly had not learned about it in my entire research career of 20 years. And since then, I just decided that I'm going to pursue neuroscience. And I was there for about 6.5 years. And after 6.5 years, I ended up joining Kantar. So I was doing a lot of work in the area of EEG, using EEG and eye tracking to measure reactions to marketing stimuli. And then, when I joined Kantar 6 years ago, the focus shifted on using emotion AI and facial coding and other technologies. So, my journey in neuroscience has been very, very interesting, rewarding, and enriching, both from a professional standpoint and personal as well. So today I use neuroscience to enrich my daily life. So I use it to make myself happier. I use it to make myself smarter and even plan my day.
That's awesome. Very cool. So for those who are unfamiliar with Kantar Neuroscience, can you explain briefly what your offerings are?
Sure. So, I think you already know about Kantar's partnership with Affectiva, and then one of our biggest offers is we use facial coding to measure moment by moment emotional engagement while people are watching an ad.
Yeah.
And that helps you to optimize an ad. It gives you highs and low points of an ad. We've also partnered with iSquare to incorporate eye tracking. So you have the option of including eye tracking along with facial coding to see not only what people were feeling, but where they were looking at in the ad. And then we have a bunch of reaction time techniques. I think one of the key things is, when you're measuring emotions, you need to not be asking questions, because the more you think about a feeling, the feeling changes.
Right.
So the more you ask a question and the more people think about the feeling, the intensity of the feeling, which moves from your amygdala to your prefrontal cortex, it actually diminishes. And your rational part of the brain starts to take control. And therefore, you need to come up with techniques which are embedded in terms of giving you a very quick reaction of what people are feeling. And therefore, we use reaction time techniques. And a few of them are intuitive associations, which measures spontaneous feelings about a concept, product concept, or an ad. So when you watch an ad, what were you instantly feeling? And again, without getting into too much detail, it's based on reaction time techniques. The other is we use emotional priming or implicit affinity, essentially to measure gut level love towards a concept or an ad. And that is something which is complementary to asking stated love about a concept or an ad. And then finally, we've got another product which is also based on reaction time techniques. It's called Brand Imprint, which essentially measures, what are which specific assets, which could be, it could be a logo, it could be a tagline, or it could be a person, which specific assets are intuitively associated with that, with the specific brand. So the assets are the specific assets, are they famous? Are they distinctive? Are they intuitive? So essentially, it will kind of give you indications of which of the assets are specifically driving brand recognition and help, marketers to then choose which specific assets to use in which specific media to promote brand recognition and brand equity.
Awesome. So I'd love to kick off the topic with this first question. So what kind of questions are companies asking around, inclusion and diversity in advertising?
Yeah, in fact, and it's been a very, very interesting journey, because what kind of questions we are getting from the clients, and literally I'll tell you the last few days, where the kind of questions we are getting from clients is they're creating single race ads, for example. And what they wanted to understand is, if they use a single cast, which a single race cast or one specific demography, does it appeal to other races as well? Because that has an impact in terms of where they advertise. So, and just to give you an example, one of the questions was, so if I use, a Black American cast, do I only advertise on BET? And it's a very interesting question, because there hasn't been too much research which has been done on it.
Yeah.
And one of the things is, like, one of the questions which came was, so if I am using a single demography, would it appeal to other demographies or would it alienate them?
Mm-hmm.
And, and then, of course, how do you, one of the other thing is that when you start to pick specific demographies and start to represent them, how do you make the ad culturally relevant to them? Because every demography identifies with a different culture. Therefore, how do you make it culturally relevant? And what are the different ways in which you can actually show inclusion and diversity in advertising? So, these are some of the questions which have been coming from clients.
Definitely very complex.
Very, very complex.
So, based on your knowledge and your expertise, what would you say some of the biggest challenges are with regards to inclusion and diversity in advertising today?
a few of them. And what comes to mind is, I think one of the questions and one of the challenges is, what is enough? Is how much of inclusion and diversity do I need to show in advertising?
Okay.
And I don't think there's an easy answer to it unless you do research on it. And the work which we've done with Affectiva in terms of trending diversity of skin colors over a period of time, what we've seen is that about 50% of the ads do represent diversity of skin colors. And the 50% had increased once the Black Lives Matter movement started. It increased to about 58%. But the question was, is this enough? And for that, we had actually, done a couple of things. We had gone in and looked at the census data, and the census also comes up with the inclusion and diversity index, which is based on the probability that two people identified at random are from a different race at any given point in time. I didn't know this.
Yeah, I didn't either. That's cool.
And the census data actually shows that the diversity inclusion index increased over a decade, and in 2020, I think it was in the range of 61. And when we'd even asked people whether they should be represented in advertising people of color, should they be represented more in advertising, and do they portray an authentic reflection of society, we got 68% of the people who said that. So I think one of the challenges was, are we doing enough? And the answer to that is no, well, we're not doing enough. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, which I think we've realized by looking at. But the other, I think, challenge also is that, the advertising industry is not entirely representative of the audience for whom they are creating content for.
Yeah.
And, when you look at data from industry group Creative Equals, it shows that there are very few underrepresented groups among people that are making ads. And, just to give you only, for example, only 1 to 2% of staff have disabilities. There are just 17% of creative directors who are women. So how do you, with an industry which is not fully represented, it does become a challenge to create ads for those specific demographies that you may be looking to advertise, or whatever you want to reach out to them and communicate to them. So there is, and of course, there is very little, I would say, research across demography. I mean, there is a research available, but in terms of the impact of advertising, of how one demography reacts to an ad where they see somebody similar to them or somebody different to them, there isn't too much data in that specific space, which is what we wanted to sort of, fill.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of leads me to the big point, which was, Kantar recently hosted a webinar on IND and advertising, diverse reaction, inclusive advertising. Some insights were uncovered using Affectiva's emotion AI technology, which you had mentioned. Can you provide a brief description on what this event was, what you were looking to do?
Yeah, sure. So, again, inclusion and diversity is a very, very wide scope, and we wanted to only focus on findings which were focused on racial representation in advertising. We had specifically focused primarily on, how is racial representation in advertising evolving over a period of time, which I briefly talked about. The second one was, what are consumers' views on diversity in advertising? And what are reactions to single race ads versus multiracial ads and diverse ads by diverse audiences? So in particular, we wanted to look at Black Americans, Hispanics, Asians, and whites, and see how they react to different kind of diverse and inclusive ads. So I think that was one of the key points of difference in terms of exploring when you show your own race, do you end up connecting with the ad a little bit more as compared to another race, or do more races appeal to that ad? So, and for that, whenever you're discussing anything to do with inclusion and diversity, we wanted to use implicit techniques. So we practically used most of the techniques which I briefly talked about. We used facial coding, we used eye tracking, we used intuitive associations to understand this implicit or intuitive spontaneous association to the ad. And we had emotional priming to understand the gut level love to the concept of diversity for a diverse community. So we actually used implicit techniques along with explicit stated our link suite, which essentially evaluates the creative potential of the ad. And then on top of it, we also added certain specific questions on inclusion and diversity to evaluate whether the ad was actually doing well or not. And these were more in terms of is the ad progressive and modern in terms of its impact to society, and is it having a positive impact on those who are underrepresented in advertising? So, we made sure that we evaluated the ad from a very, very sort of holistic point of view.
Yeah. So, and we'll drop in the link to people so people can download the webinar and the presentation, the recording, because it was fascinating. I definitely recommend people check it out. I'm just curious, was there something specific that led you to take on this project? Did you have a personal story or a mission to kind of conduct this research?
Yeah, well, some of the work which was coming was led primarily by questions which kept on coming from clients.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was also interesting because, I was, when I was used to be sitting and watching the Olympics, I would kind of see different kind of ads which were coming in. There were single race ads, there were multiracial ads. And literally I was, sitting and I thought of this whole idea that would a single race ad, and there was one specific ad which was done by the same company, and I'll briefly talk about that, which had shown an Asian family, a Black American family, and a white family. And I was kind of wondering, why would you do that? And would one such ad be enough? Or do you need three different ads, to appeal to all the different races? And that literally became a quest for me to understand. And, and then I think the broader, I would say, overarching sort of mission was, are there points of similarity across different races? Something that unifies all of us.
Yeah.
And, we all kind of look at differences, but are there ways in which we can look at common threads that actually bind us? So that literally became one of my sort of overarching goals when I got into this.
Super interesting. I love it. So and early in your presentation, I remember you had talked a lot about bias. So I was wondering if you could talk to us about, some of the different types, the importance of understanding it, and, what it really means when it comes to understanding different responses to ads.
That's a great question, because, bias is hardwired into our brains.
Yeah.
And there was a study which was done in neuroscience, I think in 2018, that basically shows that people recognize their own race faces faster and more accurately than other race faces. It's called the other race effect. It explains the reason for affinity bias. Affinity bias is that the people who look more similar, you tend to favor them. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are different kinds of biases. There's gender bias, there's age bias, there's confirmation bias. There are different kinds of biases, but for the sake of simplicity and for the sake of this specific research, I'll probably focus a lot more on affinity bias, and primarily because bias happens and it's so pervasive because your brain makes very, very quick decisions. There's your fast brain and there's your slow brain. Well, your fast brain, which Daniel Kahneman refers to as system one, you make decisions so quickly. But also one of the reasons is that, and I'll explain affinity bias, is that your brain is actually hardwired to process faces. Brain has the ability to recognize a face in less than 40 milliseconds because there's a part of your brain that's called the fusiform gyrus, whose role is to recognize a face. And therefore, you can recognize a face so quickly, and if the face is your own race face, then you will automatically tend to be a little bit more positive towards the person from your own race. Now, the other interesting part is that your amygdala, which is your emotional part of the brain, which is its role is to protect you, it's responsible for fight or flight response, plays a very important role in implicit bias. And your brain pretty much decides in a few milliseconds if this is a friend or a foe, because your emotions are processed faster than rational thoughts. So your brain very quickly can create a stereotype, because we all love stereotypes. It makes life very easy to deal with. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why you need to understand how bias can actually play a role in advertising, because the good news is that bias is actually malleable. Mm-hmm. There has been research which has been done where they've actually found out that, when you show inspiring faces of people of color, implicit bias has changed. Awesome. When you ended up working with people from a different demography in a project, people's implicit biases change. So there is a possibility. There are ways in which advertising can change people's implicit biases by showing, people of color in a positive way. If you show people of color in a positive way, you have the power to be able to change people's implicit biases.
Yeah. And was there anything that surprised you during this research project initiative, or, was that a big finding of yours?
Yeah, well, yes. I think one of the key findings was that, when I began with this premise that do single race ads, can they cut across different races? And to give you an idea of one specific ad, which was showing an Asian character, and there was the specific ad which had an Asian family, a Black American family, and a white family. And when we looked at these three ads, and all for the same brand, we found that the Asian and the Black American and the white ad actually appealed a lot more to people of color than white.
Oh, cool.
And to me, that was surprising.
Yeah.
Yes, I did expect the Asian ads to appeal more to Asians, which it did. I did expect the Black American ad to appeal more to Black Americans, which it did. But the white ad did not appeal to white people. It appealed more to people of color. And that was a surprise. There were two things. One takeaway was, yes, even if you show a single race ad, it can appeal to other races. Mm-hmm. But it's not necessary that when you show the race which is being shown, and if it is not shown in a positive way, it will not appeal to the race which it is representing. And that was the reason why the specific white ad was not liked by the white audience, because it was not showing them in a very positive light. Mm. The other interesting part was when we had shown when we had represented culture, which was in one of the ads, it cut across all demographies. When we had shown a multiracial family with a very, very common relatable situation, and the affection between both of them was so strong, it cut across all races. So the interesting part was, it doesn't matter as long as the theme is authentic and relatable. There is the power of advertising to cut across all races. So emotions played in the right way, played in a positive way, have the ability to unite all of us.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Was there, maybe that is it, but is there any other, single takeaway that you would have, based on this project, based on your research, based on what you've seen that you would recommend that advertisers keep in mind when they're trying to,
Yeah,
increase the diversity of their advertising?
sure. So, yeah, right. I think the one important takeaway was that when all this has an impact in terms of return on investment for the specific organization. So what we found out that 40% of the people would actually stop using the brand if it did not promote inclusion and diversity. What we also found out was that if you promote inclusion and diversity and you promote underrepresented audience in a positive way, it impacts both short-term sales and long-term brand equity. So it's not only the fact that you just make a representation of people who have been underrepresented, but showing them in a positive way actually has a positive impact on ROI.
Very cool. Are you allowed to talk about anything that you have coming up next, or you could tease any other research projects you're working on, either in this vein or anything?
We are actually, our next series would be a continuation of the IND, and our next series would focus on LGBTQ, and again, they have huge spending power, but we see them being grossly underrepresented in advertising. So that's the next chapter.
Awesome. Very cool. Definitely looking forward to that. Do you have anything else for our listeners? Call to action you have for them?
Well, I mean, I think the big call to sort of action is to be able to, do a much greater service to your community by having inclusion and diversity in advertising. And, it is potentially people, and especially advertisers and marketers, have the potential power to change implicit bias. So my call to action would be that people look at the research, because it gives a lot of insights in terms of what they can do on a tactical basis. And we are also doing private sessions with clients. So if people want a private session and they want to learn more about it, they can reach out to me or Anna Wilgan. And, and of course, you can listen to the webinar recording, which hopefully we'll be sharing with the link.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll drop that stuff in the show notes as well. So that was all I have for you. So Deepak, it was a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you so much for making the time to chat today.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Deepak had some fascinating insights to share around the research he conducted and what the clients are saying. And I found his knowledge around the different facets of bias and how it can be changed to be super interesting. I also loved how his interest around this really complex, sometimes sensitive topic was really rooted in discovering the common thread that would unite us all on the topic of bad storytelling, the key of which I think is arguably the universal language of emotions. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our Human-Centric AI podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts for new episodes. We're also on social media, so please reach out to us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and share any feedback you have on the show. Don't forget to rate us and comment with your feedback to help make the podcast more discoverable for others. Until next time, thanks for listening.